They don't just pull away. They don't just go silent. When the avoidant disconnects, something strange happens inside them. While you're left feeling abandoned, they're not drowning in guilt. They're not crushed by the weight of loss. Instead, they feel lighter, freer, even alive. It makes no sense to you, because closeness should bring warmth. Connection should bring safety. Love should feel like life itself. But for the avoidant, it's the opposite. Their nervous system whispers a dangerous lie. You'll survive better in the cold. This is the paradox. They crave what kills connection, and the distance that wounds you is the very place they feel most at home. They don't just pull away. They don't just go silent. When the avoidant disconnects, something strange happens inside them. While you're left feeling abandoned, they're not drowning in guilt. They're not crushed by the weight of loss. Instead, they feel lighter, freer, even alive. It makes no sense to you, because closeness should bring warmth. Connection should bring safety. Love should feel like life itself. But for the avoidant, it's the opposite. Their nervous system whispers a dangerous lie. You'll survive better in the cold. This is the paradox. They crave what kills connection, and the distance that wounds you is the very place they feel most at home. The false safety of distance. For most people, connection feels like home. It feels like warmth, like belonging, like oxygen. But for the avoidant, connection feels different. It feels dangerous. It feels like too much. When they get close, their chest tightens. Their nervous system spikes. Their mind whispers, "This isn't safe." Not because you've done anything wrong. Not because love itself is wrong. But because long ago, love was paired with danger. Closeness was paired with pain. Vulnerability was paired with loss. So now, when you lean in, they lean out. And when they lean out, something surprising happens. They don't feel guilty right away. They don't collapse under grief. They don't sit in silence aching for you. At least not at first. Instead, they feel better. They feel lighter. They feel free. It makes no sense to you. How could walking away feel better than walking toward love? But to them, distance is oxygen. Disconnection is calm. Coldness feels like safety. When you text and they don't reply, you feel panic. You feel abandoned. You feel unwanted. But when they pull back, they feel release. The weight on their chest loosens. The invisible pressure fades. They can finally breathe. This is why they seem alive when disconnected. Not because they don't love you. Not because they've stopped caring. But because their nervous system is wired to mistake closeness for threat and distance for peace. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with heavy stones. Every question, every expectation, every moment of intimacy. To them, it adds another stone. At first, they try to carry it. They smile. They nod. They even enjoy some of the moments. But soon, their shoulders ache. Their back bends. The weight feels unbearable. So what do? They drop the bag. And in that moment, relief floods their body. The pain is gone. They can finally stand up straight. That's what disconnection feels like to the avoidant. It's dropping the bag. It's release. It's silence that feels like healing. But here's the tragedy. The bag you thought was filled with love, they experienced as weight. The closeness you thought was intimacy, they experienced as suffocation. The warmth you thought was safety, they experienced as threat. And so, the very thing you offer to heal them is the thing they feel they need to escape. You try to close the distance. You call. You text. You reach out with love. But the closer you come, the more their body screams for space. And when they get that space, it feels like life to them. No demands, no risks, no chance of being engulfed. Just freedom, just quiet, just coldness. Coldness feels clean. Coldness feels easy. Coldness feels safe. The avoidant feels alive in the cold because their nervous system finally calms down. Think of it this way. When they're close to you, their body is on high alert. Their heart beats faster. Their chest feels heavy. Their mind races with thoughts like, will I lose myself? Will I disappoint them? Will they want too much? They don't always say it out loud, but they feel it deep inside. And when they step away, all of that pressure vanishes. It's not about rejecting you. It's about escaping the storm. Inside their own body, you see their silence as absence. They feel it as peace. You see their withdrawal as cruelty. They feel it as survival. You see their coldness as rejection. They feel it as freedom. This is why it hurts so much. Because you're both living two completely different realities. To you, connection heals. To them, connection hurts. To you, distance kills. To them, distance saves. Here's what makes it more complicated. That sense of safety they find in the cold doesn't last. Because once the calm wears off, a different feeling creeps in. Loneliness, emptiness, regret. But in the moment, the relief feels real. The safety feels permanent. And so, they keep choosing distance, as if it's the only way to breathe. The avoidant feels alive in coldness, because they confuse peace with emptiness. They confuse calm with isolation. They confuse relief with healing. But it's only temporary. And deep down, they know it. Because no matter how safe the cold feels, it can never replace the warmth of real connection. This is the false safety of distance. It's why the avoidant runs. It's why they freeze. It's why they disconnect. Not just from you, but from themselves. And while it may look like they're thriving without you, what they're really doing is surviving in a cage of their own design, a cage built from silence, from withdrawal, from the belief that coldness keeps them alive. And here's the deepest truth. The avoidant doesn't hate love. They don't hate closeness. They don't even hate you. What they hate is the feeling of being consumed. What they fear is the loss of self. What they crave is safety. But they've mistaken silence for safety. So when they step back, they feel alive. But what they've really done is trade connection for control. And that control always comes at the cost of love. When safety turns into prison, at first, the avoidant loves the quiet. The silence feels clean. The space feels safe. The weight is gone. But the cold, though comforting at first, always carries a hidden cost. Because the same silence that protects them also starves them. The same distance that soothes their fear also deepens their loneliness. The same coldness that makes them feel alive slowly begins to kill the very connection they secretly crave. When they first pull back, their body sighs with relief. Their chest loosens. Their mind grows still. But then, hours pass, days pass, sometimes weeks, and slowly, an emptiness begins to rise. Not an emptiness of safety, but an emptiness of loss. They start to wonder, did I go too far? Did I push them away for good? Will anyone ever really stay? But these thoughts are quiet. They come in whispers, not shouts. So instead of reaching out, they bury them. Here's the cycle. Step 1, they feel overwhelmed. Step 2, they disconnect. Step 3, they feel calm. Step 4, they feel empty. And step 5, they repeat the whole thing again. It's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't want love. It's that the only way they know how to feel safe is by running from it. But here's the truth. They don't tell you. Every time they retreat, every time they go cold, every time they disappear, they do think about you. Not always in the way you imagine. Not with longing texts or desperate phone calls. but in quiet flashes. When they hear a song, when they see your favorite food, when they drive past a place you once laughed together. The thought is there. The memory is there. You are there. But instead of reaching, they freeze. They turn the memory inward. They keep it hidden. Because reaching feels like danger, but remembering, that feels safe. This is why the coldness becomes a prison. They live in two worlds. On the outside, they look detached, untouched, unbothered. But on the inside, they carry the echoes of connection, the ghost of closeness, the memory of love. And yet, instead of stepping back toward it, they wrap themselves tighter in silence. Because silence is predictable. Silence doesn't demand. Silence doesn't risk rejection. But silence also doesn't love. And this is the prison the avoidant builds for themselves. Think of it like this. Connection is fire. It's warm. It's alive. It gives light. But fire can also burn. It can consume. It can destroy. So the avoidant steps back. They choose the cold. They choose the dark. And at first, the cold feels safe. The dark feels peaceful. But over time, the cold seeps in. It stiffens their heart. It numbs their joy. It starves their soul. And now, what once felt alive becomes a kind of slow death. The avoidant feels alive in disconnection because they mistake relief for life. But relief is not life. Relief is just the absence of pressure. True life, true vibrancy, true aliveness, that comes from love, from risk, from letting someone in. But letting someone in is the one thing they fear most. So they stay in the cold, not because it gives them joy, but because it gives them control. Here's the irony. The avoidant longs for connection, but only in ways they can control. So they stay quiet, hoping you'll reach out. They withdraw, hoping you'll prove you won't abandon them. They go cold, hoping your warmth will come find them. It looks like rejection. It feels like punishment. But in truth, it's their way of saying, show me love in a way I can survive. And yet, this survival strategy backfires. Because when you feel pushed away, you hurt, you retreat, you wonder if they even care. And when you retreat, their worst fear is confirmed. See, they tell themselves, no one really stays. No one can handle me. No one can love me as I am. And so the prison locks tighter. The silence grows deeper. The cold becomes permanent. Not because they don't want love, but because they don't know how to hold it. This is the paradox of the avoidant. They feel alive in the cold, but only for a moment, because eventually, the cold turns into hunger. The silence turns into longing. The distance turns into grief. And yet, instead of reaching out, they often reach further inward, deeper into isolation, because isolation may hurt, but it's a hurt they understand. And for the avoidant, a familiar hurt always feels safer than an unfamiliar risk. The truth is this: coldness isn't life. It's the absence of life. But when life has always felt unsafe, even emptiness can feel like freedom. And so the avoidant returns to it, again and again, searching for safety in the very silence that slowly starves them. The high cost of their escape. Every time the avoidant disappears, they think they're winning something. Winning space, winning freedom, winning peace. And for a moment, it feels true. The silence is intoxicating. The distance is like oxygen. The coldness feels like a reset button. But there's something they never tell you. That very reset button comes with a price tag, a cost so high, they spend their whole lives pretending it doesn't exist. The cost is this: they lose you, piece by piece, moment by moment, memory by memory. Every time they disconnect, you disconnect too. Not because you want to, But because your heart can only take so much, you can't pour into someone who always turns the cup upside down. You can't chase someone who keeps running faster. You can't fight for closeness when they keep pulling the rug out from under you. So you stop. You hesitate. You grow quiet. And while they think they've escaped, what they've really done is plant the seed of loss. Avoidants believe distance keeps them safe. But the truth is, distance keeps them starving. Because love doesn't survive in silence. Love doesn't thrive in avoidance. Love doesn't bloom in the dark. Love needs warmth. Love needs presence. Love needs truth. And when those things vanish, love doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't demand. It just withers. The avoidant, in their silence, doesn't see this happening. They tell themselves, they'll still be there when I return. They'll understand I just need space. If they love me, they won't leave. But love, real love, cannot survive if it is constantly starved. And so, while the avoidant feels alive in disconnection, their relationship begins to die in it. Here's the cruel irony. The avoidant fears being left. They fear being abandoned. They fear being forgotten. But the very thing they do to avoid abandonment creates it. Their silence pushes you away. Their distance makes you question. Their coldness breaks the bond. And in the end, what they feared most becomes the very reality they created. This is the hidden cost of coldness. It doesn't just protect them, it destroys what they love. And sometimes, by the time they realize it, it's already too late. Think about it this way. Imagine holding a flower. It's delicate, it's alive, it's beautiful, but you're afraid it might wilt. So instead of watering it, you lock it in a dark drawer. And when you finally open that drawer, what do you find? Not the safety you hoped for, but the very death you were trying to prevent. This is what the avoidant does with love. They hide it. They silence it. They protect it from risk. And in the process, they suffocate it. Here's the part that cuts even deeper. The avoidant doesn't just lose you. They lose themselves. Because love is not only about receiving, it's about expressing. It's about giving. It's about allowing the heart to breathe. But when they retreat, they cut off their own lifeline. They numb their own joy. They silence their own warmth. They disconnect from the very parts of themselves that make life worth living. So while they may feel alive in the cold, what they're really feeling is the rush of temporary relief. Not life, not love, not fulfillment, just relief. And relief, without love, is a poor substitute for life. The hidden cost is that they trade wholeness for survival. They trade intimacy for control. They trade love for fear. And while fear may feel safer, it never feels full, because safety without love is emptiness, and love without safety is chaos. The avoidant knows this tension, even if they never say it out loud. They live in the space between two impossible desires: the desire for freedom, the desire for closeness, the desire for safety, the desire for love. And because they can't hold both, they almost always choose coldness, not because it fulfills them, but because it hurts less. But here's the question they never ask themselves: what hurts more in the end? The fear of being consumed, or the reality of being alone? The sting of closeness, or the ache of emptiness? The pain of risk, or the pain of regret? Because the truth is, when they look back, most avoidants realize the silence didn't save them. It only stole from them. It stole moments of laughter. It stole memories of joy. It stole intimacy they secretly craved. And worst of all, it stole time. Time they will never get back. The cost of their escape isn't just losing you. It's losing the life they could have had with you. the kind of love that feels safe, the kind of bond that heals old wounds, the kind of closeness that doesn't consume, but frees. But they don't see this until they're standing in the ruins of everything they once wanted. This is why the comfort of coldness is a lie, because in the end, the cold doesn't protect, it erodes. The silence doesn't heal, it breaks. The distance doesn't save, it steals. And the avoidant, though they may feel alive in the disconnect, are slowly losing the very thing they've wanted all along. Not safety, not relief, not control, but love. When distance becomes a habit, at first, distance is a choice, a coping mechanism, a survival strategy, a quick escape. But over time, that choice turns into a pattern, and that pattern turns into a habit, until one day, the avoidant doesn't even realize they're doing it anymore. Think about it. A child learns to hold their breath underwater to survive. At first, it's uncomfortable. It burns. It feels unnatural. But the more they do it, the more it becomes second nature. The avoidant has done the same thing. With their emotions, they've practiced holding back for so long that it no longer feels strange. It feels normal, automatic, expected. Disconnecting is no longer just a reaction, it's an identity. The danger here is that when coldness becomes a habit, it starts rewriting the avoidance story. They tell themselves, "This is just who I am. I don't need anyone. I'm better off alone." But beneath those words isn't confidence, it's conditioning. Conditioning that says closeness equals danger. Conditioning that says love equals risk. Conditioning that says silence equals safety. And the more they repeat it, the more it sticks. Not because it's the truth, but because it's the only truth they've practiced. Here's where it gets even more painful. Habits don't stay contained. They spill over. They infect. They spread. So the avoidant doesn't just pull away from you. They pull away from friends, from family, from opportunities, from life itself. They learn to numb in love. And then they numb in everything else too. And yet, this numbing is addictive because there's a rush in shutting down, a sense of power, a sense of control, a sense of relief. It feels like victory. They don't realize it's actually defeat. Think of it this way. Every time they walk away, it feels easier than staying. Every time they go silent, it feels simpler than speaking. Every time they turn cold, it feels safer than being warm. So they keep choosing it again and again and again until the choice isn't even conscious anymore. It's reflex. It's default. It's who they've become. This is why so many avoidants struggle to change, because they don't just fear intimacy. They've trained themselves to live without it. And once you've built a life around avoidance, connection doesn't just feel scary. It feels foreign, like speaking a language you've forgotten, like trying to run after years of standing still. It feels impossible. Here's the heartbreaking part. Deep down, the avoidance still longs for closeness. They still crave the touch that reassures, the voice that calms, the bond that heals. But because distance is their habit, they sabotage the very thing they want. They push away what they're secretly desperate for. And when you finally give up, when you finally walk away, they tell themselves a lie. See, I was right. No one stays. Love always leaves. Not realizing it wasn't love that left. It was their habit that drove it away. The comfort of coldness becomes a prison. At first, it feels like protection, but eventually, it becomes isolation. And isolation isn't peace. It's punishment. A punishment they give themselves. without even knowing it. The truth is, habits don't just protect us, they define us. And when coldness becomes the habit, avoidants don't just avoid love, they avoid life. They avoid laughter. They avoid vulnerability. They avoid being seen. And slowly, without realizing it, they avoid themselves. This is why breaking the cycle feels so impossible, because it isn't just about choosing closeness once. It's about unlearning years, sometimes decades, of habits built on fear. It's about teaching their nervous system that warmth won't destroy them, that honesty won't shatter them, that presence won't consume them. It's about realizing that survival isn't the same thing as living. But here's the hope: habits can change, stories can rewrite themselves, coldness can melt, but only when the avoidant faces the truth. That distance may feel like safety, but it is costing them everything they were born to experience. And while they may have survived the past, by disconnecting, the only way they'll truly live is by learning to connect. And so the real question is this: when does the avoidant finally decide that survival is not enough? When does the habit of coldness become too heavy to carry? When does the silence stop feeling like power and start feeling like loss? Because the truth is, until they face those questions, the cycle continues. And every time it does, they lose a little more of you and a little more of themselves. The price of living half alive. The avoidant thinks coldness is freedom. That shutting down is strength. That pulling away is power. But here's the truth: what feels like freedom is actually a cage, and what feels like power is actually fear in disguise. Every time the avoidant disconnects, they don't just protect themselves, they also abandon themselves. Because the heart wasn't built to live on silence, the soul wasn't built to live on distance. We were created for connection, for presence, for intimacy. And when you strip that away, what's left isn't safety, it's emptiness. At first, they don't notice the cost. They tell themselves, I'm fine on my own. I don't need anyone. This is just who I am. And in the short term, it feels convincing. But in the long term, the cracks begin to show. The avoidance starts to feel restless, not because they need space, but because they've drowned out what their heart is actually asking for. They start filling the void with distractions, work, hobbies, noise, anything to keep them from hearing the silence inside. But no matter how much they achieve, no matter how much they escape, the ache remains, because you can't outrun what lives within you. Coldness comes at a cost. It costs them love. It costs them joy. It costs them the chance to truly be known. It costs them you. Imagine this: the avoidant has someone who cares, someone who shows up, someone who tries again and again to break through the walls. But instead of leaning in, they retreat. Instead of softening, they harden. Instead of speaking, they go silent. And when you finally walk away, they tell themselves a story. I knew it. Love never lasts. People always leave, not realizing it wasn't love that left. It was them. They left the moment. They chose coldness over closeness. The price doesn't stop there, because eventually, the avoidant isn't just losing you. They're losing themselves. They stop recognizing who they are. Because who are you really? If you never let anyone see you, who are you? If you've trained yourself to numb every real feeling, who are you? If silence has become your loudest expression, the truth is, the avoidant thinks they're protecting their identity, but in reality, they're erasing it. Here's the paradox: the avoidant disconnects because they fear loss, but the very act of disconnecting creates the loss they feared. They're terrified of being abandoned, so they abandon first. They're terrified of rejection, so they reject first. They're terrified of not being enough, so they build walls that keep anyone from ever knowing how enough they already are. This is why coldness feels alive, but is actually death in disguise, because it tricks the avoidant into believing they're in control, when really, they're being controlled by fear, by habit, by a nervous system that hasn't yet learned what safety and love feels like. But here's the truth that can't be avoided. No matter how much they run, no matter how much they hide, the heart keeps score, the soul remembers, and one day, the silence they worship turns on them. It no longer feels like relief. It feels like regret. It no longer feels like freedom. It feels like grief. It no longer feels like safety. It feels like being trapped in a life half lived. Because the ultimate cost of the avoidance coldness isn't losing you, it's losing themselves, the version of themselves that could have loved, that could have thrived, that could have been alive. In every sense of the word, that version is buried under walls and silence. And unless they choose to melt the ice, they will never meet who they were always meant to be. But here's the hope. Coldness can thaw, distance can shorten, walls can fall, because no habit, not even the habit of avoidance, is stronger than the human heart's desire to be known. And as much as the avoidant fears love, love is also the one thing they can never fully escape. It calls to them in the quiet moments. It pulls at them when the distractions fade. It whispers to them in ways they can't ignore forever. And maybe, just maybe, the avoidant will one day realize that the comfort of coldness was never comfort at all. It was fear. It was habit. It was survival. But it wasn't life. Life begins when they dare to be seen, when they risk being known, when they allow themselves to feel alive, not in disconnecting, but in connecting. And so, the question lingers. How long can someone live half alive before they finally hunger for more? How long can coldness feel like comfort before it finally feels like chains? How long can silence feel like safety before it finally feels like loss? Because love will always wait, but not forever. And if the avoidant doesn't choose to step out of the cold, they risk discovering too late that what felt like survival was actually the slowest form of self-destruction. And maybe, just maybe, that realization is what finally melts the ice